Welcome to Truth Be Told About Going Wild. I'm your host, Robert Hensley, and this is the podcast inspired by the principles of personal rewilding. I recently came across a prompt on social media from a mentor of mine, and I thought that I would share that with you today because it was a wonderful opportunity to really think through one of the pillars of personal rewilding, which is pillar number 4, honoring the wild ancestors. But the prompt was, what can we do to heal generational wounds or trauma and honor the natural world in the process? And so I thought more about this. We do talk a lot about honoring the wild ancestors and understanding where we came from and kind of our innate link to the natural world and what the people before us had gone through and how that helped to shape our own relationships with the wild. And then, of course, we've just come out of Halloween, which is a holiday really that is about honoring our ancestors and connecting with, and not connecting in a seance-y kind of way, but connecting with the spirit of those who've gone before and honoring their legacy and what they've given to us. And so I was thinking about this, and I think, and now this is just my personal opinion, and I'm offering it to you guys because I think that it could help in some instances. I think that one of the easiest ways that we as families, as relatives, as kin, whether that is immediate family or within a community, is to come together in a way that gives us an opportunity to speak, to discuss what trauma or hurt or wounds there might be, and to again accept, acknowledge, listen, hear, and work through those things together in a space that is also giving us an opportunity to create, right? So even if your group of people are coming together, say an immediate family, like Lord only knows in my family, we've got a lot of trauma, a lot of generational stuff, a lot of wounds that have been there for a long time. But I think that when you can bring people together, right, in a way that we say, listen, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about this, and we're gonna bury it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to accept what's going on and how everyone is feeling. And then we are going to bury it and let something grow from that. And so you get together and you plant a tree, or you plant a couple of trees, right? And in some instances, some of those wounds are so old that the people who actually caused them are no longer here. So in some ways, it's an opportunity also to forgive. We may not always forget, but we can forgive, right? And we can decide what to do with that moving forward. But planting a tree, planting a garden, to clean a waterway, to do a trail pickup, or anything where we're outside and we are again interacting with the natural world in a way that is supporting life, supporting good, bringing something new in place of something old. I think those are all wonderful ways of creating ritual that help to honor the wild ancestors, right? Heal generational trauma, heal wounds, and and give us a sense of belonging, a sense of place. It all kind of comes back to this idea of placemaking and making sure that we, again, are working to reconnect with the natural world as we are trying to, you know, live in this space of healing and positivity. I know it's a lot to think about. Uh, it was a lot for me to think about in the prompt. But I think that anytime that we can ritualize something like that, where we can um, choose to take specific steps and give ourselves a format or a platform to really change how we're feeling or to make sure that we are feeling heard. Um, and then again, the big part of this, and I know this is an issue with my family, is not always having the support and a and an open mind from everyone that needs to be involved, right? Like there are people in my family that I can't really go to them and say, okay, we're going to plant a tree today and talk about this thing that happened or this, argument that's been lingering or this feud that has gone on for too long. Um, because they look at you like you're stupid. Uh, and that's, you know what? And that's the thing, right? Because sometimes those rituals are just for you. You may want to include other people. You may want to do good for others. And sometimes they're not ready, right? They're not in a place where they can accept that. And you have to accept that that's the case, right? That is part of, that's just going to be a part of whatever that is, right? And that we can really only do what we need to do for ourselves. So sometimes those rituals are meant for multiple people. For other people, you hope that other people will join you and take part, and sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes you are going to practice that ritual alone, and even if you can only just heal yourself, that is you taking responsibility for something, creating something out of that chaos or that negativity. And then what I really love about this too is that once we've healed that in ourselves, it doesn't get passed on to the next generation. It doesn't get passed on to the immediate generation in your line, right? So maybe you're not going to be able to solve this issue for your nieces and nephews and their children, but maybe you could do that for your children. Maybe you're solving this or healing this wound so that it doesn't trickle into or pass on to your children or their children or their children's children. Um, and those are the changes that are really important, right? Because you have to stop that cycle of hurt and pain and trauma somewhere. Um, and I know people like to think about like, well, if it's something that happened to so and so, like, and they're not letting it go, or, how is that affecting? Because the thing is, right, is that when we live with that much trauma or pain or hurt, it really does, and science has proven this, it changes our DNA, right? We end up carrying that trauma and passing it on, right? And then psychologically, also, if we are living with trauma, if it has affected our lives in any way, right, then it continues. We end up passing those ideas, those thoughts, that negativity onto the next generation, right? Have you ever kind of been in one of those situations where you meet someone who, you find out that you're related, and then you're just kind of like, I wonder, why have our families never, no one ever talks. So how do I not know? And you go and you ask your mom or your dad, and you're just kind of like, oh well, I met so and so, and they said that, we were kind of talking, we kind of figured out that we're cousins. Why do we know? We never see them at a family reunion, or we never talk to their family, and they only live a street over. Like, and then it kind of comes out that, you know, two generations back, there was a fallout, there was a fight, and they decided that they were never going to speak to, you know, this other person again. And that ends up getting passed down, not because anyone actually remembers what actually happened or what was going on, but it's just because it became this generational trauma. It just got passed down from one person to the next, even though there is no real discernible reason not to have buried that hatchet or fixed that feud or, but yeah, I mean, and again, when we have that stuff that's passed down, it really does block everything else, and so how that applies to personal rewilding, it's easy. When someone has had a hard time, right, with nature, right? And a lot of times it's because they were in this mindset that they had to conquer the natural world. And the natural world isn't meant to be conquered, so it kicked somebody's butt. And now they have this chip on their shoulder, or had a chip on their shoulder, about what didn't work for them trying to live in conjunction with nature. But that was the thing, they weren't really living in nature, they were trying to rule over it. And so then that shapes this whole thing. It creates this sense of despair and unease about the natural world. And then that just gets passed on to their kids. And then their kids remember what grandpa or their parents said. And then they pass that on to the grandchildren. The grandchildren remember what grandpa said about, you know, this place, or how nature had, almost wiped the family out or whatever. And then it builds this thing that just continues. And rather than trying to fix that, we just accept it, right? Until we get to a point where all of a sudden we feel like we're disconnected from the universe, and we're not sure why we're in this place of rage and disillusionment and depression. And and then someone comes along and says, well, maybe you need to reconnect to the natural world, kind of start over, go back to the beginning. And then they're like, oh, well, I can't do that because my grandpa said. And then that's when you realize, okay, so I'm carrying not what's happened to me. I'm not allowing my own experiences to color this situation. I'm allowing what happened to my grandfather to color this situation. And I haven't actually had any experiences of my own because I've avoided them, because I didn't want to have negative experiences the way that he had negative experiences. Right. And that's how that starts, and that is something that sometimes it's so simple as, someone doesn't learn how to swim, and then you find out that their parents never taught them how to swim or didn't take them near water. And you find out that the parent only did that because they have this innate fear of water, even though they never had any experiences on the water. And you go back down the line 3 generations, and so and so had a child who drowned, right? Somebody had a child who drowned, and it scared the crap out of the family. And so from that point on, children just didn't go near the water. They didn't, water became not welcome in their circle. And, and it becomes this thing that just kind of continues for generations, and you're not even sure why or how it got that far. Right. So, yeah, I think, again, the way for me, and again, this is for me, you've got to find what works for yourself. But I think that for me, the idea of creating rituals that are connected to, or that can connect back to the natural world. So this idea of, planting things, planting gardens, caring for gardens, caring for trails, caring for waterways, these acts of creativity or creation, right? And bringing life and positivity to that situation, and using that time and that space as a way of, altering our perspective on the natural world, on our families, and seeing how that works, right? Using that time as, again, a way of trying to heal those connections, heal those wounds, and again, move forward together in a way that is honoring not just your ancestors, but honoring the natural world. So, thank you so much for listening. This was a little longer of an episode than I had intended, but that's all right. I rattled a little bit. Hope you find this interesting, and that you start to think about your own rituals and ways to heal trauma and generational wounds in your family and in your line. Remember, there are 3 opportunities each week for new content from the Truth Be Told family of podcasts on the Club Paranormal channel on YouTube. That's Tony Sweet on Fridays with the original Truth Be Told, Bonnie Burkert on Wednesdays with Truth Be Told Transformation, and of course Truth Be Told About Going Wild every Monday. And all of those shows go live at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern on their respective days. And if you'd like to know more about personal rewilding, or you're interested in finding out more about what I'm doing, please feel free to Visit my website at www.rhnaturereconnect.com. Again, that's rhnaturereconnect altogether.com. And until next time.